Well, although it is summertime and it's a lot of county fairs and lots of things going around, it is still a race for Secretary of State going on. And joining us on the news line is no stranger to this program, the Democratic nominee for the Secretary of State, Beau Bayh. So, Beau, how's it going, my friend? Good to talk to you.
It's going well, Abdul. I've had enough fried Oreos and elephant ears to last a man a lifetime, but I'm still standing, so we're doing well.
No, good to know. Funny state fair story. I want to say back in the late 90s, when I worked for the Illinois Attorney General, we had to do the Illinois State Fair. And one time we had a big anti-violence thing when all the school shootings were going on, so I dressed up in a giant bird suit. It fell under other duties as a sign, believe you me. So,
yeah, I'm sure you're well compensated.
Got me a recommendation to law school, so
there you go.
I'm not complaining. So, my friend, how's the campaign going so far?
It's going well. As you mentioned, it's county fair season. So last night I was in Lafayette, Tippecanoe County Fair. I was in Park County, and the night before was in Vigo County, Benton County, down in Clay County, all over the state. Just getting out, meeting people, getting our message out. And I think it's pretty clear that Hoosiers are ready for a change in this office.
So what are you hearing from folks as you talk to people, at county fairs? What are their concerns?
Well, the number one concern I hear, Abdul, is that some of the folks in Indianapolis are just not representing Hoosiers throughout our state in an honorable way. And there's no worse example of that than Secretary of State Diego Morales, who, as you know and your listeners know, has wasted our hard-earned tax dollars on luxury SUVs for himself. He's hired his brother-in-law, pays him a six-figure salary, taking these trips all over the world, and giving out, millions of dollars in no-bid state contracts to his largest donors. And that's why, I've been very clear in this campaign. If you donate to our campaign, I appreciate your support, but I will not be awarding you a state contract. There's no place for that type of insider dealing in our state government, and Hoosiers, when they're fully informed about all that nonsense, agree with me.
On that issue, you brought up an interesting point about not taking state contracts from folks who donate to your campaign. Now, how does that work? Is it companies? Is it individuals? Let's say I work for a corporation. I give you a campaign contribution, but my boss didn't, but my boss applied for a job. Have you guys sort of figured out the dynamics of how that would work?
Yeah, well, any firm, any company that's donated to our campaign will not be awarded a contract from this office. This office awards contracts to companies and not individuals. At least that's what I believe to be the case. And so that's what the policy means.
Yeah, because I was kind of wondering how that would work. Let's say, someone from an Eli Lilly or Rolls Royce or Cummings, hey, I like Beau, I like what he's doing. I want to support him and give him a campaign contribution, but that doesn't necessarily mean that my company would get a campaign contribution. So,
well, those are companies that employ thousands of people. And I think it's most important that any corporate money flowing into this office, which, I have not taken much of at all. My opponent, on the other hand, is taking a different tact. Those companies, those firms will not be receiving contracts from this office.
Now, going back to the other point, which is I talk about how Diego Morales has sort of lost touch with Hoosiers. Mr. Morales is no longer on the ballot. Max Engling took over at the state convention. You were there, not in the convention hall, but outside the convention hall, along with Greg Ballard and other folks. How do you run against a Max Engling as opposed to a Diego Morales? I know Diego Morales had a very easy playbook to run against. Now that he's no longer the nominee, how do you folks run your campaign?
Well, Abdul, I think we run a campaign on the issues and talking about the government corruption that Max Engling and his friends have propped up for the past 4 years and turned a blind eye to until they came to the realization that they were going to lose to us. So this change of Diego Morales was not brought about because, of the corruption that we kind of just went through. It was actually a result of them realizing that they were going to lose political power, which tells you everything you need to know about Max Engling and his friends. He clearly is not concerned with the government corruption. In fact, I was doing a radio program the other day. The radio host had on all of the four candidates for Secretary of State and point blank asked Max Engling, will you commit to conducting an independent audit of this office if you're successful? And he hemmed and hawed and didn't answer the question. It's a yes or no question. And the answer to that question is, on my part, is clearly yes. There's been too much going on wrong in this office that we need to root out. We need to find out who else is complicit. And he's clearly not committed to that because he's probably wrapped up and his friends are wrapped up in some of the same wrongdoing.
Our guest on the program today is Beau Bayh. Beau is a Democratic candidate for Indiana Secretary of State, so we're having a conversation with Beau on the program today. Beau, when you look at Diego Morales' tenure in the office, he got elected back in 24, took over from Holly Sullivan, got reelected. What do you think has gone wrong in the office? What would be your first priority to fix? Obviously, you guys want to do the forensic audit to find out, do a deep dive, what's going on, what contracts been given where, what money has been spent there. But what would you say during Diego Morales' tenure were the most sort of grievous things with respect to taxpayers and taxpayers' money?
Yeah, so there's unfortunately a long list of things to choose from. But the first
we got 20 minutes. So.
The first thing that we will do, as you just mentioned, is conduct an independent audit of this office, because government corruption kind of resembles an iceberg, Abdul. So the public is only aware of the top 10%, the luxury SUV on the taxpayer dime, the hiring the family members, the world travel, the no-bid contracts. That's just what we're aware of. And so it's important that we conduct this independent audit to get at the 90% lurking underneath the surface, because in all likelihood, there's others complicit in this and they need to be held accountable in addition to the Secretary of State. And so that will be our first priority, is cleaning up the corruption, because the taxpayer and the voter, will not buy into some of the priorities I have past the audit if they fundamentally don't believe that the office is being run in a proper way. So it's important to level set and restore some ethics and integrity of the office. So that being said, there are some important steps we need to take outside of the audit. So one of the important aspects of this office is you're in charge of registering new businesses in the state of Indiana. And our amazing entrepreneurs throughout the state that create good jobs and feel our economy should have faith that this office and the business division of this office is being run in a way to actually serve the entrepreneur, not the office holder. So if your listeners are curious, go on to the business division of the Secretary of State's website, click on the button, I want to start a company. Now, what you will be brought to is not a list of resources and great information about how to set up your business here in our state. You have to go through a bunch of self-promotion on the part of the office holder, Diego Morales, to scroll to the bottom of the page where you'll see something called the Business Development Center, which is a great resource that our state has created to make business owners aware of things that could be helpful to them, like available lines of credit, licensing requirements, all of these things that may be helpful to new business owners. The problem is not that the tool doesn't exist. The problem instead is that the office holder is too interested in self-promotion and not in actually helping entrepreneurs in our state. So there's all types of changes along those lines that we need to make in terms of how this office is run to make it actually serve Hoosiers and business owners and not act as a means of self-promotion.
By the way, we talk about sort of that means of self-promotion. Obviously, Diego Morales is the Secretary of State, and obviously the Secretary of State does a lot of events, and obviously elected officials put their names on items. You think it's just gone a bit overboard?
Yeah, I mean, it's, and that's not just my opinion. So here's a good example, Abdul. So the Secretary of State, and I get asked about this all the time at the town halls we do. Can you stop sending me these emails? Because if you set up, you might get these too, Abdul. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. If you set up an LLC in our state, the Secretary of State has used that basically as carte blanche to just send you unsolicited random promotional emails, not about information that may be helpful to you as a business owner, but just, talking about himself. And that's something I hear about a lot on the campaign trail. And it's kind of like, The Boy Who Cried Wolf is a famous story that we all heard growing up as kids. If the Secretary of State is just sending out mass emails every week that have nothing or little to do with the actual responsibilities of this office, that are not completely pertinent to business owners, then when there actually is a time when you really need to get some information into the hands of business owners, they're going to be less likely to open your email because the previous 500 that you sent had nothing to do with their business. So we need to make sure that when we're contacting business owners in the state, we're giving them important information that they need to see and not just flooding their inbox with useless promotional garbage.
Our guest in the program today is Beau Bayh. Beau is the Democratic candidate for Secretary of State. So we're having a conversation with Beau on the program today, just talk about a number of different issues and various issues. Beau, on the issue of auto dealers, because Secretary of State basically has three jobs, oversee elections, securities and exchange, and business services. On that securities and exchange issue, obviously there's been some controversial issues there. What would you do in the securities and exchange division, which a lot of people don't necessarily know about, with the Secretary of State's office?
Yeah. So one of the parts of my background that I think makes me uniquely qualified as compared to my opponents in this race for this job is that as an attorney, I worked for a federal judge in Bloomington, and we handled several securities fraud cases at, albeit at the federal level. But one of the job responsibilities of this office, the Indiana Secretary of State, is to investigate securities fraud allegations at the state level. And so I have direct relevant job experience, and I think I'm the only candidate in this race that has that job experience as an attorney to actually understand securities fraud issues. One of the things that's gone wrong with the securities division of this office is, I think maybe you have reported on it or one of your colleagues, is that the reimbursement fund of the securities division of this office that's meant to compensate victims of securities fraud in our state has actually, that money, at least according to reporting that I've read, has in some part at least not been used to compensate victims, but has been used to pay out vendor contracts. And so there's a mingling of state funds that I believe is inappropriate. So we need to make sure, and it's not surprising given the other improprieties that have gone on in this office with respect to taxpayer money, it's not surprising that that money is being used inappropriately as well. Every dollar entrusted to the securities division of this office should be put forward to investigate wrongdoing and to compensate victims, and not used to pay out vendors.
How do you get past the stereotype that Democrats aren't necessarily business friendly?
Well, I can't speak for every Democrat. I can only speak to myself, speak for myself. And what I know is that we need, as a state government, we need to incentivize and we need to support the amazing and thousands of entrepreneurs all throughout our state, because without them creating good paying jobs and paying taxes into our economy, our state does not thrive. We can't have great public schools. We can't have roads and bridges. We can't support our police and firefighters, and we don't have a vibrant state. So, of course, we need to support small business owners. We need to reduce red tape where it exists and make it easier to start and run your business, because that's, kind of the foundation of a healthy economy in our state, which helps everybody.
And speaking of healthy economies, this may not necessarily be in the Secretary of State's wheelhouse, but since I got you on the line here via Zoom, I figure I may as well ask you. You had a lot of local governments, particularly here in Indianapolis, with funding cutbacks and Senate Bill 1, had to go and raise real taxes. The city council, they raised the wheel tax. The mayor vetoed it, so they're kind of going with their back and forth. But you got a lot of other communities out here who also had to deal with the wheel tax issue as well. As Secretary of State, what can you do to not necessarily deal with the wheel tax, but help local governments sort of navigate the brave new world we live in?
Well, I can act as an advisor mostly to the county clerks and a good partner to the county clerks in the 92 counties of our state to execute our elections effectively. I can interface with business owners throughout our state to make sure that we've reduced red tape where it exists when they set up their new businesses. But I think the most important thing that I can do as Secretary of State is to rebuild trust in this very important office. Unfortunately, we have a current Secretary of State, and my opponent, Max Engling, has supported him for the past almost 4 years, and in fact said he would vote for him had he been successful at the convention. So he's endorsed all of the wasteful spending, the corruption, the insider dealing that I've gone through, and that's degraded public trust in this very important office. So the most important thing that I can do for the people throughout our state, not just in state government, but outside of it too, is to audit this office, clean up the corruption, clean up the wasteful spending, return to the extent we can money to the taxpayer, put it back in your pocket, and restore trust that this office is being run well.
And I thought it was interesting that England had said he had Diego been the nominee, he would have voted for him again. That kind of line confuses me. Obviously, I understand delegates and conventions and blah, 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 and supporting the winner. I get all that. But it just seemed odd. They would just come out and say, yes, I'd support Miss Morales, like as opposed to say, hey, we'll worry about that bridge when we come to it, or we won't worry about that at all because I got the job. You think somebody would be a little bit more politically savvy to answer that question, but that's just me thinking out loud. So.
Well, it's clear to me, given his answer, that the corruption, the insider dealing, the waste of our hard-earned tax dollars does not concern him. Because if it did, he would call it out, but he has not, because he's a part of the same system that has propped up Diego Morales for the past 3 or 4 years. And so Hoosiers cannot trust someone who is a product of this corrupt system to clean it up. That's why we need fundamental change in this office, and that's what we're campaigning on here.
Beau Bayh with us on the program today. Beau is the Democratic candidate for Secretary of State going against Max Engling, the Republican, Greg Ballard, the Independent, and Laura Schilling, the Libertarian. Any thoughts, Beau, on former mayor entering the race? Because I actually kind of like you guys both, so just be brutally honest with you. So big shocker, I know.
Yeah, it's certainly a commendable feat getting all those signatures to get on the ballot. I believe, and maybe this is another point of distinction between me and Max Engling, I want more competition in our state politics. Politics, in this sense, operates a lot like business. There's a reason that we have federal law and state law banning monopolies in our country. If you have one store in town, if you have one group in charge of everything, they can charge consumers whatever price they want. The same is true in this respect in politics. If you have one group of people, if you have one party in charge of everything in our state, that can lead to some pretty unreasonable results for voters and taxpayers, like we've seen with Diego Morales and others. So I welcome former Mayor Ballard into the race. I think more competition is a good thing. It makes everyone sharper, and I look forward to a robust debate on the issues headed here into the fall.
Speaking of robust debate, obviously 2026 is an important midterm election year. Democrats have someone basically running in every, I want to say 97 House districts and almost all Senate districts. How do you think that'll help? How do you think that'll play out in the general election? Because obviously, you're at the top of the ticket because this at one time where there's no governor, no U.S. senator, no presidential race. So the Secretary of State's at the top of the ticket. But this, I think, is one of those rare moments, like almost like 20, 30 years, that Democrats have run somebody basically everywhere.
Yeah, well, I think it just speaks to the fact that Hoosiers are hungry for more choices, right? More competition, more options, and a more robust debate. I think it's a good thing, regardless of the outcome, that Hoosiers will, when they go to the ballot box in November, be given more choice than they have had here in the recent past, and that's a good thing. And I look forward to getting here on the campaign trail and talking about the importance of this office.
Speaking of choices, should it be easier for independents to get on the ballot? Obviously, what the mayor did was no easy task. 70,000 signatures, 41,000 certified, and and if he gets a 10% threshold, they get to have primaries. 2-3% threshold, they get conventions. Should ballot access be easier?
Yeah, well, just first of all, just to set the record, he's running to start a new political party called the Lincoln Party. So it's unclear what principles that party would be set up under. But I do believe that it should be a little bit easier to run outside of the duopoly of our politics. And I'll tell you why. Because in order to clear the signature hurdle that Greg Ballard has cleared, you've seen it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so if you don't have access to that type of funding, you basically are precluded from running and creating a new political party here in the state of Indiana. And so we should ask ourselves, do we want people who don't have access to tons and tons of money to be able to run for public office under their own banner? I think the answer to that question should be yes. And I think money in general in our politics has caused some negative impacts. I mean, look at Max Engling, whose largest source of funding doesn't come from Hoosier voters. It comes from a dark money group operated by Marty Obst, who lobbies on behalf of Chinese companies, the donors of which, Abdul, you and I will never know. And so I think Hoosiers should be very skeptical of someone who wants to lead this the elections division and run the elections in our state and oversee campaign finance transparency. Hoosiers should be very skeptical of someone seeking this role who's unwilling to disclose his donors himself.
Beau Bayh with us on the program today for a few more minutes. Beau, the Democratic candidate for Secretary of State, running up against Max Engling, Laura Schilling, and Greg Ballard in the fall election. Beau, one of the big criticisms against you has always been that you really don't live here in Indiana. You were born in Virginia. You're a Nepo baby. Just anything and everything. Tell the audience about your background.
Yeah, well, I was born here on the north side of Indianapolis, so that's just false. And, I've been very proud to be a Hoosier my entire life. Now, we moved to Washington, D.C. when I was young. I didn't have a say over that decision. It was just because my dad was serving in the United States Congress. And I will just tell you, I can speak from my personal experience. When your dad or your mom is serving our state in the United States Congress, you, as their son, you feel almost like a representative for your state yourself a little bit. And I was always proud to be from Indiana and to be a Hoosier. And we were back and forth all the time for family events and campaign events. And every adult decision that I have made has been about coming back here and serving my state or serving my country. I commissioned as a Marine Corps officer, took my oath of office in the War Memorial downtown. I voted in every Indiana election since I was 18. I think Max Engling was a Virginia voter and living in D.C. as a professional for the past, more than a decade. And so it's rich coming from him to not call me a Hoosier when I've paid taxes, federal income taxes and state taxes here for for the past 8 years as well. And this is my home. This is where I will always be, and my family and loved ones live here as well. And I just want to give everything I have to serving our state.
And Bennington, an interesting one. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Does it really matter if someone is a quote unquote native born Hoosier or moved here or adopted here or went away, came back? I always found that fascinating since I've been in Indiana for 20 years. Abdul, you're not a Hoosier. Like, well, no, I'm not. I'm an Illini because I'm from Illinois. I mean, just 74 miles up the road. But fundamentally, we're all Midwesterners. Different degree of different shades of Midwesterners. We're also that sturdy, practical. We live with the god awful winters, ungodly summers, but the earth doesn't move underneath our feet until the magic goes away. So.
Yeah, I think candidates should be evaluated on their ideas and whether they're the right man or woman for the office they're seeking. And, some of that will be wrapped up into how you relate to the state you come from and the issues the issues that Hoosiers confront and whether you can understand them and speak to them and come up with solutions to them. But I think candidates should be evaluated on their ideas and their merits. To the extent we can extract personal attacks from politics, I think that's a good thing.
And speaking of personal attacks and politics, this doesn't necessarily impact your race directly, but I wrote a column over the weekend that it did. Some of your folks may have seen it too. I know you guys tend to follow my stuff. That when Mike Braun ended WBEs and MBEs by executive order, which he can't do because it actually requires legislative approval, but that's another story for another time, argued to a certain degree, he gave you and Greg Ballard an issue. I would say Greg Ballard even more so because Greg actually ran an MBE, WBE program in the city of Indianapolis when he was mayor. Do you think that'll have some impact on the race, the governor's decision to, by executive order, end WBE and MBE programs?
Yeah, look, I think that, these two things are not mutually exclusive, unfortunately. And it's unfortunate that the Attorney General made them out to be. I think we can have a completely merit-based contract, awarding process and have some of the best minority-owned and women-owned businesses be awarded those contracts. And I think that's part of a robust economy in our state where we help our amazing business owners. And I can promise you and your listeners that in my office, contracts will be awarded completely based on merit. And that necessarily means that we're going to be awarding, we will likely be awarding contracts to a diverse group of people because we have amazing business owners from everywhere and from every background in our state.
And I also thought it was interesting too that, and so from a lawyer perspective, no one complained about this. There were no complaints that somebody from Posey County or Sullivan County or Richmond, Indiana, didn't get a contract with the state or government because the minority or woman business got that. I thought it was a bit odd. It was looking for a problem that really didn't exist. But that's just me thinking out loud.
I've worked in the courts, and you know this as an attorney. Usually, advisory opinions are not favored because you want a live dispute. You want something actually before the court. And I know this is a different situation with the Attorney General offering an advisory opinion, but typically when you're making legal determinations, you want a live dispute where you can actually discuss the merits and come to a conclusion based on the facts and not just offer something in the hypothetical, which I know you're well aware of.
Yeah, we call that standing in Con Law 1.
That's right. Yeah.
Injury, causation, redress. If there's no injury, then who's the injured party? So, but once again, that's just me thinking out loud. Beau Bayh with us for a few minutes on the program today. Beau, the Democratic candidate for Secretary of State. Just talk about a number of different issues facing the office. Beau, obviously, one of the other issues that popped up was with Diego Morales, not so much the no-bid contracts, but I go back to it was the candidate declaration form. It's that every candidate has to fill out in the state of Indiana to be on the ballot. And when I found out that the declaration forms were filled out incorrectly, they were notarized, that caused just the biggest stir in the entire universe. Obviously, it's more of an insider thing, but affected literally every state representative, every state senator, and every judge, every county prosecutor. And people literally had to drive to Indianapolis on that Friday to get their things filed in. What does that one story tell you amongst the many stories affecting Secretary of State's office for the past 6-8 years?
Well, it tells me that in addition to being corrupt, Diego Morales is also incompetent. But Abdul, it's to you and me, this is not surprising. This is a guy that has been fired from this office not once, but twice when he was a lower level staffer. And so it should not come as a surprise when someone ends up leading the office who's been deemed, incompetent enough by his superiors to be fired, that he doesn't, cross his T's and dot his I's when he's leading the thing. And so it's very concerning. What's even more concerning is the fact that Max Engling said he'd vote for him had he been successful. Max Engling has endorsed the incompetence. He's endorsed the corruption in the insider dealing. And so why should Hoosier voters trust him to do anything differently? They shouldn't.
Second and last question for you, my friend. Obviously, you had a contested convention. Blythe Potter, you got 61% of the vote. Blythe Potter got 39%. Had been talking to those progressives, those folks who want to take on the establishment, quote unquote. You're the establishment candidate. Congratulations, welcome to the club. Have you spoken to them? Have you reached out to them? What are they telling you about what they would like to see the Secretary of State's office do?
Yeah, well, first of all, this office has been in the hands of a single group of people for more than 25 years. And so to the extent that there's a discussion about establishment versus anti-establishment, I think it's pretty clear that Max Engling and the same group of people that have controlled this office for more than 2 decades are the establishment. We're running an insurgent campaign that's meant to disrupt the status quo in this office. And the status quo, unfortunately, is waste of taxpayer money, is hiring relatives, is no bid contracts to large donors. And so regardless of your ideological leanings, I think every Hoosier should be able to get on board with rooting out waste and corruption and insider dealing like that from our state government. It's time for a change here in Indiana. Republicans, Democrats, and independents are waking up to this, and I look forward to earning their support.
My friend, final question for you. Obviously, the regular people start paying attention to campaigns around September-ish. What's your goal for the rest of the summer, apart from eating more corn dogs and more deep-fried Snickers bars? And by the way, go run, because it is really easy to gain weight during this time of year.
Yeah, I've been a runner for better part of my life, so thankfully I can work off hopefully some of these elephant ears and things like that. But our plan for the rest of the summer is just keep doing more of the same that we've been doing, and into the fall. I've been to about 80 or so, 85 or so of the 92 counties. We'll get to all 92 before this campaign is over, and I will go anywhere and talk to anyone of any political party about the need for fundamental change in this office. So that's been the plan for the past 9 months. It's going to continue to be the plan, getting out on the campaign trail, going anywhere, talking to Hoosiers about the importance of this office and why we need change in November.
Oh, I lied. This is my final question. It has been a very reliable Republican state for years. The only Democrats that got elected were Barack Obama back in 2008 and Glenda Ritz, I want to say, in 2012. How do you reach to those moderate Republicans, independents, and maybe some of those conservatives who aren't necessarily crazy about voting for pushing for a D ballot? Will you encourage them to scratch? And how do you deal with straight ticket voting?
Well, our message it does not exclude people based on ideological grounds. Every Hoosier, you could be the most conservative. In fact, a lot of my conservative friends do not like it when their hard-earned tax dollars are wasted by government in Indianapolis, and that's the number one problem with this office. Is that Diego Morales and Max Engling, who supported him for the past 4 years, have turned a blind eye to government waste and government corruption. So regardless of where you fall in the ideological spectrum, regardless of the letter in front of your name on the ballot, we should all be able to get on board with rooting out that kind of waste, that kind of corruption from our state government. So my message appeals broadly. And so hopefully that will show itself in the results here in November.
All right. Well, our guest on the program today has been Beau Bayh, the Democratic candidate for Secretary of State. Good to talk to him for a few more minutes, a little bit longer than we usually chat, which is actually kind of a good thing. So, Beau, my friend, thank you very much for being with us. Always good to talk to you, sir.
Thanks, Abdul. Happy to come back anytime.